Well, hi everyone. We are back again. This is week number 4, also chapter 4 of the book When Christians Get It Wrong by Adam Hamilton. So week 4 is interesting because the title of the chapter is When Bad Things Happen. Well, aren't bad things happening right now? We are dealing with COVID. We're dealing with all kinds of crises throughout the world, in our country, in our hemisphere, you name it. Um, it's quite an interesting time, and it can be very frustrating, and it can also be very easy to want to then blame God. Um, you know, we all hear it. Some of us say it. Why did God let this happen? How could God let this happen? Um, in the book, there's the example um, yeah, I'll get it yet. In the book, there's the example of the shooting, the elementary school shooting. I have to refer to it. I'm sorry. I just cannot remember sometimes. Um, how am I not remembering this? Huh. Sandy Hook. Phew, that was rough. Um, there's a perfect example. I remember exactly where I was the day that happened. I was in Dunkirk, New York, with my parish up there, and I was picking up the flowers for worship, and I was kind of excited to do it. I don't know. It was a silly thing, but um, it was the first time I was picking up the flowers for that parish, and um, I had everything ready and available, and chit-chatting with the person at the florist, and somebody came in and said, hey, turn the TV on, because the florist had a TV there. And then we all just went silent. And you wonder in those moments, like, how could this happen? So, how can it happen? Well, we are a broken people. We are fallible. We are sinful. We have a lot of mistakes within us. That does not make us bad. That doesn't make us any less valuable. And that's proven to us because God sends us Jesus Christ. God saves us by God's own grace. So, how do we understand when bad things happen? I always love when Jesus is with the disciples in Jerusalem and they're going on and on about, what do you mean, these horrible things are going to happen to us and people are going to harm us, and I've said it in sermons. Jesus effectively says life happens, bad things happen. And he tells them about the 18 that were killed by the Tower of Siloam. You know, Jesus today could be saying, do you remember those kids killed at that elementary school? It isn't that God isn't watching or trying to um, heal us and take care of us. It is simply that bad things do happen. But it doesn't feel like it's enough of an answer. It doesn't feel like it's enough because our human nature says we want to blame and we want to find reason and fault. And this makes a pretty big mess for us because then we get into all of these discussions about, well, does God choose certain people to be hurt? Does God choose certain other people to be very well all the time? And, you know, that makes it a very different discussion, because if we're asking why God lets bad things happen versus why do bad things happen, the answers become very different. Why do bad things happen? People make mistakes. We're fallible. We said we're broken people. Um, we are sinful. We will hurt each other. We do bad things. We might produce bad things. Well, let's think of this epidemic, this pandemic, for a moment. Something we hear so often, at least the pastors are hearing this way too often. We'll hear the comment, we should be choosing faith over fear. Jesus over fear. Jesus over fear. Okay, that's a great fundamentalist line, but what does it really mean? Faith over fear. Well, let's talk about the people who had such faith, they went to church, and they had church, and they worshipped 100 people, and half of them now have COVID. And the great Grammy of the congregation is dead. Did they have less faith? Would they have been better off had they had more faith? Do you see how the questions then start to become bizarre? And the thoughts about what God has in store for us become so convoluted and become so far apart and so removed from the plan God has for us. God has a plan for us, right? God's plan is for us to be loved and for us to love. There's not like this cosmic, how can I say? There's not this cosmic, great mystical, only can be revealed by a psychic kind of plan. The plan is love. That's it. He talks in the book, how Hamilton does, about how we can respond as Christians. We can respond to when bad things happen in really bad ways. Somebody's harmed in a car accident. You're always going to have that one friend that says, well, it was God's plan. Maybe you learned something from it. Yeah, I learned I'm not going to go through that intersection again because I have PTSD. Right? I mean, let's be realistic. Sometimes we say things that are not helpful at all. But to respond in love, to respond with love, that makes a difference. I'm going to read a notation he has here. This is from Romans 8, beginning at verse 18, going through 28, and then again 35 through 39. He writes, Christians have sometimes applied this passage, especially verse 28, in hurtful ways. Verse 28 does not say God causes all things, nor that everything that happens is good. Instead, Paul affirms his triumphant faith that if we put our lives in God's hands, God will work for good in all things. Okay. You're going to read that passage on your own. And bad things happen. Boo-hoo-hoo. God's angry at me. God's angry at the world. God wanted this to happen. God made this happen. I'm doing so. It happened. Take joy in the fact that it wasn't worse. Take joy in the fact that God has walked through it with you. Death, God walks through it with us. Life, God walks through it with us. Birth, God walks through it with us. Trial, God walks through it with us. And on and on and on. One of my favorite books of the Bible is Job. Sometimes I feel like Job. But one of my favorite books is Job. The friends. Be wary of the friends. I probably said this once before. I'm going to bring it back again because why do bad things happen? We have that image of Job where, God and Satan were in this great battle together, and we're, who does he love more? Really? Do you think God needs to play that game? That is just nothing more than a human expression trying to write and explain for other human beings about God's love. Okay. And patience in faith. Faith is patient. So, In the book of Job, one of the first things that happens when he's on the ash heap, his friends show up, and initially they sit with him. And that's good. If your friend is going through a trial, sit with them, pray with them, listen to them. But then later on, his friends come back because they get tired of waiting and sitting. Oh, God, how long? This is just never going to end. How long must we sit? I love you, Job, but I can't sit here all day. Well, they probably really couldn't. They had other things that they had to get done. But it's when they come back that is when they get it wrong. They start out right, and then they get it wrong. Where do they start? Where do they go wrong? They get it wrong because they start questioning. Well, why would God do this to you? You must have brought it on. And they start coming up with anecdotes and, remember that time when? That is not helpful at all. That is not sitting with your friend. That is not listening to your friend. That is not praying with your friend. That is not taking joy with your friend that God is there with you. It shouldn't take a whole lot to simply show the love of Christ to someone else in need, and even to yourself when you are in need. But we come up with these questions, and we push, and we push. And what we end up doing is we push ourselves further from God. Why do bad things happen? I'm going to paraphrase Jesus Christ. Bad things happen. Look at that tower that fell on those 18. What do you want me to tell you? Bad things happen. Maybe somebody could have watched the construction manager better. Maybe somebody should have been monitoring the concrete preparation better. See? Who's at fault? You can't always know exactly why. But what comes of it? What does God do with it? How does God sit with us? See, that's the beauty of Job. That in patience, Job knew God sat there with him. Job cried. It was a lot of pain to take. But Job knew that God was there with him. Sit on the ash heap together. Chew on that a little bit. No, I seriously hope you have an excellent discussion. I hope this has put you in some kind of a direction. Well, I guess I'll give you one more. So, going back to the pandemic. So, I have this buddy that often, we banter back and forth. And he's younger, so he asks me a lot of questions about, what I'm doing with my ministry and stuff. He has a member who came forth with that very conservative, lack of a better term, right-wing kind of Christianity in his Lutheran church that said, and the man said, we should choose faith over fear. There's a church camp in Missouri that, quote, chose faith over fear. And I forget how many dozens of children it is who contracted the COVID-19 virus. Jesus says to Satan, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Use what you've been given. Faith is a gift. That means we're all given faith equally, in equal amounts. That means nobody has more or is better at. God reveals God's truth a little bit more each day. God is working with the scientists on the vaccine. God is working with us as we try to figure out how best to protect one another. Faith is not testing God. Faith waits in patience on the ash heap. Thanks be to God. Have a good talk. God bless you.